important thing that you need to realise is we're the only group of people sticking up for people with disabilities. Yes. Right? Everyone should understand that, and I'm not going to point Sean out, but he's fairly obviously blind. Manages to get to our court cases in London, doesn't just sit on the internet watching us, actually comes up and supports us, and comes into the courts and listens to what's going on, right? So those people, and especially the council that cancelled us on the last event, when this gets to court, and it will be, a number of people with disabilities are going to be brought to court as our witnesses that we are not left or right wing. We are constitutionalists and believe in the rule of law, right? That's what we believe in. And that means that the state cannot do certain things to you without them being brought to the courts, right? So there's a number of issues that I could talk about, but I won't on this session. I'm gonna, where was I on the last one? Because I was about to finish something off and I can't remember what it was. Don't forget, none of this is scripted. If you script something and you do all these, you know, them little charts that we go through. You ever been to them really boring presentations where everyone starts falling asleep, right? My role really is just to talk about this, and as I've said previously, I could talk for 18 hours non-stop about the Constitution and English law. But what we are going to do is just briefly go through this element here, right? So, again, English St George's flag. The original flag was the griffin, and without going through the history of it, we ended up with the St George's flag. I can go into some more detail. Everyone heard of the Irish Sea? Do you know? Where is it? Huh? So it's between England and Ireland. Do you know what it was originally called? The St George's Channel. Right? It was stolen from us. And when I say stolen from us, it was renamed, right? This is a permanent attack on England, English rights, right? And the rule of law, because they're trying to superimpose administrative law and destroy England with regionalisation. Once they've done that, and they're successful, England will no longer exist, ever. It's gone. And we should never be the generation that allows it to happen, right? Again, I'm going to go through these, and then we'll go through questions and answers. So below are the common law constitutional rights belonging to the English. And it doesn't matter whether you're black, brown, or any other shade in between, you are regarded as English, right? What they don't like, Ephro nationalists, is they believe that only white people are English. Right? That's not truth, right? There are, there isn't ethnically English people here. In other words, my history in this country goes all the way back to the year 1200 and a Norfolk Knight, right? So you can't deny that there is an indigenous population of English, right? But my rights and a black or brown person's rights are exactly the same. The only bit that changes it is the Acts of Settlement that says they must have 3 generations living here before they can become a Member of Parliament. And it is so they understand our history and our culture, right? That means it safeguards and protects English culture going forward, right? That means people like Sadiq Khan, who can I think of? David Lammy, Dion Abbott, right? They're culturally not of England, right? They're communists. David Lammy's family come from Guyana, that's it. Well done. And anyone heard of Gina Miller? Yes. Everyone must have heard of Gina Miller. But she brought a case to do with Article 50. It's to do with the European Union. Do you know who her father was? The Attorney General of Guyana, who was a committed communist. Right? And Guyana had a massive civil war, and the British controlled it, right? But they had a massive civil war, and it caused lots and lots of problems out there. Her father was the Attorney General. So people made out she's just this lovely little lady. You don't know her history. And when you start looking into the history, you will always see communism. So getting back to this, the right of the realm of England and its subjects to defend themselves. Article 5 or 7 of the English Bill of Rights. And what does it do? It actually tells you, and if I was going to go back to this book here, not that one, but that one, the common law rights are in the book on the right, volume 8. But if I was to go through the Bill of Rights, and if I can find a page for you, let me get to the page. Confirmation of Liberties, and let me get to this. Great Seal Act to Royal Miles. Acts of Settlement in I'll tell you what. You're a lawyer. Find me the Bill of Rights on the page, and then I'll actually talk through some of them, only because they're interesting. What I don't do at these events is go through I haven't memorised our constitutional laws, by the way, but what I do is just go through where the Bill of Rights is, the fact that it's still law, the fact that Her Majesty the Queen on July 21st, 1988, made a declaration to both Houses of Parliament that the Bill of Rights was still in full force. The very next day, and basically she said it is the cornerstone of our democracy and it is where separation of powers comes from. Right? What happened then was she went to a place called Brixham in Devon, where is a monument to King Billy, and there is a monument there. Well done. I knew you'd find it because you're a lawyer, aren't you? You can be my junior barrister, couldn't you? Eh? So the Bill of Rights is there. What I'm going to do, it goes through. So the actual rights are in here. So what I'm going to do is just go to freedom of speech, juries, suspending power, levy, right to petition. Did you all know? I can tell you a quick story about that. Subjects' arms. That subjects which are Protestants may have arms for their defence suitable for their conditions and as allowed by law. What does allowed by law mean? Well, if you go into the declaration in that book and the heads of terms of the declaration, they tell you what as allowed by law means. The current population of whoever, judiciary, etc., say, oh, well, we can create a law restricting your right to arms. That's not what it means. It meant you can have arms for everything as long as you do not commit a crime with them. So you, as allowed by law, you can have a firearm, you can have a knife, you can have anything you like, but you are told if you use that in a criminal way, armed robbery, killing someone, whatever, in other words, murder is always been an offence, a common law offence in this country, right? So therefore, that is highly illegal. I mean, they used to hang you for it. If you do any of them things with your weapons, and we was a high trust society, right? So we obeyed the law. If you was told you cannot murder someone, believe it or not, most of the population didn't murder anyone, right? And obviously it is very un-Christian. Let me go through. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to keep that open. Hopefully it won't go back onto my thing, because I want to come back to a few of these. So this is what I'm saying. It's all law. It's in the law books, right? The right to a jury. Who's taken away our juries now? The judiciary. Right? What are they going into? They're going into saying what used to be known as the equity courts that didn't have juries. What was the equity court? It also got referred to as the Star Chamber. Who abolished the Star Chamber because it had no juries and it was really nasty? Who abolished it? The English. Right? Equity courts deal with other things. They deal with trusts, but it is a tribunal. It is a judge. There is no jury involved. Your peers are not involved with the decision making. Everyone know here But if you go in front of a jury and you get found not guilty, are you all aware that that cannot be appealed by the state? Jury's decision is final. Whereas if the judge makes errors during the trial, that can be appealed. Are questions asked though? But keep the question there. People need to understand that the British took away something else that you all had, which was a protection of your rights. Does anyone know what that is? 1929, I think it was. They abolished grand juries. What have they still got in America that you haven't got here? Grand juries. Grand juries held the state and people who work for the state, crown servants, to authority, your authority, right, as jurors. So if something happened, let's say, I don't know, someone was doing something they shouldn't have been, taking backhanders as an MP, or does that already happen now as lobbyists, right? When that type of thing happens, you got brought up in front of the grand jury. What does a grand jury do? All right? Are you all aware that they can be held in secret? So you know that you don't tell the person. Sounds really unfair, doesn't it? But it's not a prosecution. It's to find probable cause for you to be arrested, right? It's a protection mechanism. So if that jury says they listen to the evidence and they say there's no bill, or we don't believe this person should be prosecuted, you won't even know you've been investigated, and everyone walks away from it, and you've got no stain on your character whatsoever. If the bill of indictment is given by the jury, that gives authority to the police and to the prosecutors to arrest you for what you've been indicted for, because the jury have listened to the evidence and believe that you should be prosecuted and there is probable cause that you need to answer, right? What happens then is they arrest you. When they arrest you, under the American and English, you have the right to remain silent. Because it's for the state to prosecute you.
Excuse me, can you repeat that please? I missed it.
The right to remain silent and the right to a jury before that. So the right to remain silent in American terms, and where do they get it from? England, right? Is the Fifth Amendment. Everyone heard of the Fifth Amendment? Yep. Well, we call it the right to remain silent. Again, it's been gradually eroded, right? And they wasn't allowed to touch that. That's the way they've been operating, bit by bit by bit by bit by bit. But getting back to the indictment, if they was to arrest you, they turn up and then you say nothing. So one thing that you must remember, if you're arrested, do not speak to them at all, right? Golden rule is silence. By law in this country, you do not have to give them any information. The only problem you'll ever get is if they say to you, I suspect you have committed this crime, and then they ask for your name and address, and you don't give it. They can arrest you for not giving your name and address, but only if they suspect you've committed a crime. If they arrest you and you haven't committed a crime and you've refused to give your name and address, that is an offence they've committed against you. That's already been proven in court, right? So there's a big case that dealt with that, and funny enough, it was during COVID that they said, you can't do that. Basically, a guy got arrested. He took his car from an MOT. Police said, what are you doing? He said, MOT in my car. They said, we want your name and address. He said, why? They said, because of coronavirus, you've committed an offence. He said, no, I haven't. And they said, we want your address. He said, I'm refusing to give it. I've committed no offence. You know, go away. And they arrested him. It then went to the High Court, and the High Court said he was right. He's not committed an offence. He was MOT in his car, which was allowed under coronavirus rules, and he's told you what he was doing, and you still arrested him, right? that's where they can be held to account. But again, the right to remain silent, they're now removing that. Everyone's heard of what they're using is Terrorism Act, right? And you must hand over your phone, right? So when I come through the airports, I have to be careful, especially when I come back from Northern Ireland, right? Because they're waiting for you, and they'll claim your phone, they'll claim your details and say, you must give us your passwords. Right, the first thing I say when they say that is no comment. The only difference with me is they would actually get the challenge of me in court rather than a solicitor or a barrister who is British, who are not really going to stand for your rights. Does everyone understand that you've got the right of property freehold? I'm going to say something really strange now by telling you that. And I've drunk on my Guinness. It tastes much better than water, right? The right of property free. I'm not going to ask anyone to put their hands up. Any property freeholders here, unless you have something called fee simple absolute, you are not a freeholder, because the Crown can take your property any time they want. In fact, if you was to lease your freehold tomorrow and a tenant was to go in and you're on a leasehold, the Leasehold Act of 1993, I think it was, reversed the law, constitutional rights of the freeholder, and the person that's moved into your property, hang on a minute. Very nice. And the freeholder can be forced to sell the tenant the property, right? If you can be forced to sell your freehold, you are not a freeholder. Just getting back to this, is everyone aware of 3 acres at Runnymede in Surrey? JFK Memorial. Right. There's a law, and Her Majesty the Queen Elizabeth II, both, right? Both Parliament and the Queen gave 3 acres to the United States of America. It is, go and read it, look it up online, JFK Memorial, right, 3 acres, fee simple absolute. What does that mean? It means everything under the ground, above the ground, right the way up to the stars, belongs to you, right? You are sovereign on that land. It is such a crucial piece of law. That means the United States of America has an enclave in England at Runnymede, right? That means, and this is especially to any of our alternative media friends, if you wanted to do a speech anywhere, and let's say it offends against the online act or whatever, freedom of speech, etc., and you was to go to that enclave, you was to transmit that speech, which in America would be free speech and free expression. You would not be arrested for it. But in England now, under British rule, it would be an offence, and they arrested you. They can't. Why not? Because you're covered by the American Constitution. It is not, that land is not English, that land is not Scottish, it's not Welsh, it's not Irish, it's not British. It is an American enclave, right? How do I know this? Because during COVID, I did exactly that. I went exactly to that piece of land. 3 armed police officers come marching up to us on that land. And it was just, we had someone with us that was ex-military. He just happened to be ex-SAS as well, but I won't go into more detail on that. And he walked up to the coppers and said, "What are you doing here?" And they said, "We've just come up to look." And he said, "Really?" He said, "Take them firearms and take yourself and get off this land. You've got no jurisdiction here whatsoever." And they went, "Okay." And they knew and left, right? We're going to get back to something else in a couple of minutes. So, but all I'm saying is, technically, you do not have freehold rights, right? Because unless you've got fee simple absolute, you've got no rights to your property whatsoever. That's why it's easy to get you evicted. Councils that can go for, I forget what it's called now, where they can come along and do a compulsory order to take your property. then you ain't got the freehold, if anyone can do that. But it's really important for you to understand that you are sovereign on that land, and that's a fact, that's not fiction, right? The right to earn a living, another one come up during COVID. Where does it come from? Something called restraint of trade. Restraint of trade come about because the Crown, 800 years ago, started putting restrictions on printers who were printing playing cards. And it said only printers that are authorised by the Crown can print. And the reason was people kept printing playing cards. You know, like we have memes taking the mick out of people, I mean severely. I mean some of the memes are a bit naughty. You want to see them, again, I've got books on the Glorious Revolution where they show what was on the back of the playing cards, and guess what? They was just like us, them people. They put all these images on. So the Crown said, we're not allowing that. This goes back even further. And they said, we're going to put this clamp down and you can't do it. Well, it went to the courts. And the court said, that is a monopoly. You cannot have, no one in this country can have a monopoly. It's against the law, right? So it's called restraint of trade. No one is allowed to restrain you from earning a living, right? So this is interesting in lots of ways. Who's the person most recently that's famous that's used it? Everyone heard of Wayne Rooney? Right, well, so Wayne Rooney was in the High Court, and the reason was because he had contracted with a particular organisation for his image rights. And he fell out with the company, and because he'd signed a contract, they then said, we've got your image rights because you signed this contract. He challenged it. He lost in the first court, and then it went, listen to this, to the Supreme Court. And in the lower court, High Court, they said, we're not interested in ancient laws and rights. So he appealed it, because he had the money, to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court said, we are a common law jurisdiction. We believe in stare decisis. Of course, we're interested in our ancient rights and customs. That's who we are. It then listed about 7 cases going back through 800 years. This is how clever the Supreme Court judges were. They knew every single case to say, what you've just declared in that lower court is unlawful. They then found in favour of Wayne Rooney, and Wayne Rooney won back all his image rights. Because what they said was, that is a restraint of trade. You're stopping him earning a living, right? Why is it important? Because if someone was to put a contract, let's say you are, let's think of something. Let's say you're a carpenter, and you work locally, and you work for this company, and the company says, we'll take you on. You take them on, you sign their terms and conditions, and then you leave them. And then they say, you cannot work as a carpenter for the next 15 years, and you must not work in this area or at least 100 miles. That's called restraint of trade. Take that straight to court, and you will win, right? They're not allowed to do that. They're not allowed to stop you earning a living, right? It's one of the reasons, believe it or not, the journalists don't know that fact, and they should do, because no one's allowed to stop you being a journalist. You don't need a qualification to be a journalist, right? So that's one of the things that we always point up. Right to freedom of navigation and trade. You have the right. This is the bit that most people go, really? Right? By the way, it's also in one of these little books Sir William Wade wrote about it. Who thinks they need a passport to travel? No, you don't. You do not need a passport. In common law jurisdictions, you do not need a passport, right? And Sir William Wade actually said that in his book, because I was on a yacht, and he's gone all around the world without a passport, right? And he's basically said, I don't need a passport to enter your port, right? There are some clarifications of that. Do you know who created passports? The French, right? So administrative law jurisdictions, They will often say you need a passport, you need identification, blah, blah, blah. That's where all this national ID stuff is coming in, because they're moving you closer and closer to an administrative law admin, where you lose control of all of your rights. But under common law jurisdiction, and if you go to a common law country, so if I was to travel by boat from England to the United States of America, a common law jurisdiction, I do not need a passport. That isn't to say that the Americans could say, we want to check you out. Of course they can. But they won't say, we're going to kick you out because you haven't got a passport. Because the common law says we can travel between what used to be known as dominions. And there's a difference between a dominion and a colony. Colonies are British, dominions are English, right? And the English way was that we had common law and we assisted the dominions, right, with the law. I'm flying through this, by the way. The right to bring up and protect our children, almost abolished by the family courts. Right? It's one of the biggest disasters in England ever, legally. It's almost an adaptation of the Star Chamber, which is the equity courts, because in the family courts there are no juries. Right? And again, sadly, part of the problem with that was Lady Howe and pushing through lots of protections for women, right? Which I understand some of it, but not all of it. But once they broke the father ad over the family and introduced more women over the whole thing, once they'd done that, then they attacked the women, right? Which is what they're doing now. That's why, I was involved with a case where they killed a 6-year-old girl by switching off a life support machine. The point being, and I think I'm still right in saying, I am the only layperson that has ever got an injunction against the British government and won in a European Court of Human Rights. So often when I go against these people and they say, oh yeah, who are you? When they start to learn, hang on a minute, he actually got an injunction against the British government. Right? So all of these things people need to understand. I learned this myself over 30 years for a specific reason. You could all do the same thing, right? Retirees are the best possible people to learn all this. Why? Because you've already had a successful career and you can also now see how they're affecting your grandchildren and your great-great-grandchildren, right? If you don't start getting your head around this, and it's simple, it's not difficult, right? And then start challenging them, that's when they start to get frightened. That's why they don't like us. That's why they cancel us. That's why they imply we're the bad guys, not the good guys, right? When all we do is protect people. The right to bring up and protect your children. Most of your rights, so the state now, if they had a problem with any of your kids, they would put in place a guardian, a state guardian, right? That was always unlawful in the background. And I'm not kidding how much power they've got. They'll come in and take all your kids off you if you say the wrong thing, right? It's gone so far towards a communist nation, it is more than worrying. They've started to terrorise a lot of people. The right to habeas corpus. Do you all understand what habeas corpus is? Show me the body, all right? What does it mean? If I was to grab hold of this gentleman here, cart him off and lock him in a room, right? And again, this goes back through history of why it exists. Someone who knows he's locked in there could go to the High Court and say, Mr. So-and-so is locked in this room and there's no lawful reason for him to be there, right? The judges will wipe everything to one side and say, this is a habeas corpus, we must listen to it. And then they say, show me the body. So then they have to bring that person into the High Court. And they stand there and they'll say, what right have you got to keep that person locked up? And if you haven't got any right, the judge will look through it and look through the law, will look through your reasoning, and then say, release him, and you'll walk free from the court, right? It happens a lot nowadays with people who are finished their prison sentences, for example, right? And the governor says, I ain't letting you out this week. I'll let you out next month because I am the governor and I can do what I like. Next thing you know, you get a habeas corpus writ straight in there. And then the judges say, release him now, right? And that's it, and you walk out of court. So habeas corpus is still law in this country. Don't forget, I'm flying through these and I'm just giving you an indication, but all of these virtually come from the Bill of Rights and other powers. That the pretended power of suspending laws is illegal. Lots of things. COVID was a particular example, but there's many other things where they say they can suspend your right to something. The worst possible thing is the European Convention for Human Rights. Does anyone know why? European Convention for Human Rights are what's known as qualifiable rights. That means if the government declares an emergency, they can cancel your right. These rights, and English rights, are non-qualifiable. What does that mean? They are inalienable. They were given to you by God. This is based on Christian law. They cannot take them rights off you, right? That's the biggest difference between the European Convention of Human Rights, even the Declaration of Rights from the UN, and this, right? Is these are inalienable rights. The same as the United States of America, which is where they get it from. The right to assert English ancient rights and liberties. Anyone heard of the expression, he has standing? Right. So, I was having this conversation earlier. The fact that they have now created barristers and solicitors associated with the bar and all this nonsense, and they have created a monopoly, that is technically unlawful. Meaning I cannot represent you in a court of law because they have monopolised the system for them to earn money out of it. Last time that happened was Cromwell, Oliver Cromwell, and he actually stopped that, right? He actually stopped people talking a foreign language in our courts. There's lots of things that Cromwell did. I'm not saying he was a nice guy, by the way. I'm just saying he did do things that are still law today, right? And he also created a fully codified constitution. And one of them things in that constitution, I'm sure it was Article 39 of Cromwell, he said, if anyone makes a law against the rights of an Englishman, it is nullified, right? So all the way through history, even as a republic, it always went back to English rights. No one could go against your rights. So again, the £10 suspending law, asserting rights and liberties, so you have standing, you all have the right as individuals, if you understand the law, that if you get arrested, you do not need a solicitor and you do not need a barrister. What you do need to say is when you are arrested, right, no comment. As soon as you say no comment, and these people that stand back and say, well, I've done nothing wrong, so I did this and that, you've just banked yourself up. Shut up. Do not say anything. They are not your friends. They are not there to be your friends. They are there to put you behind a door. That's what they get their bonuses for. By the way, that's already been confirmed now. But on many occasions, that the more nicks they get, the more bonus they get. Right? Police constables, on average, police constables retire with an £80,000 back pocket lump sum. None of you really got that. Do you know that chief constables get somewhere in the region of £500,000 completely non-taxed cash at the end of it? And they get 2/3 pensions. That's why these people are taking liberties, is for their pensions. That's a socialist thing. It's called forward bribing. Right? So remember that them police constables are on a lot of money, and it's their pensions that they will take liberties with you, and no one will go against each other on the police. Right? They're not good guys. Rights to assert English ancient rights and liberties. That the pretended power of dispensing with laws is illegal, meaning It was more related to the Crown, because the Crown at the time was saying, I don't like that law, cancel it. You can't do that, but you can void laws, right? If a law is found to be unconstitutional, and this has already been said, by the way, it's already in the Lord Chancellor most recently said that if you was to do something that is blatantly against the law, the liberties and rights of the people, then the courts will step in, right? Not been done for a long time, but they should be. The right to petition the monarch, commitments and prosecutions for such petitioning are illegal. Did everyone hear about me getting arrested outside Buckingham Palace? Have you heard that one? Did you want me to briefly tell you what happened? Yes. So, I notified Her Majesty the Queen, lovely lady, and her old man, a geezer called Prince Philip, right? And I said, I will be petitioning outside the Buckingham House, Buckingham Palace at such and such day. Gone there, 30, 50 of us turn up. I start doing the petition. There's loads of Americans there, loads of tourists. Oh, look at this, what he's doing. I'm talking about the Constitution and constitutional rights. In come 30-year-old Bill, arrested me, handcuffed me, dragged me off, put me in the back of a van. I've blown a whistle, right, which is, blowing the horn was the English way of warning people of danger. Cops didn't like that. And then they took me off to the station. I never said anything, didn't speak to them. The funniest bit was I had the letter E on my t-shirt that fell off in the back of the van. When the chief super turns up, as I'm getting out of the van, I've got me and two coppers looking for the E. And then he went, what are you looking for? And I said, this is the first time in my life I've had two police officers looking for an E in the back of their motor. And then, because the coppers were laughing, the superintendent was in fits, right? So, anyway, it goes forward and they prosecute me. It was in court number 1 of Westminster, magistrates, the worst court in the country, and it was a judge. And the judge said there was about 100 of us in the actual gallery. Support and public support is really important on these cases. So the judge said, would you rely on your defence, Mr. Moore? And I said, Coronation Oath Act and the English Bill of Rights. He said, is this going to be a constitutional defence? I said, oh yes sir. Right. So he turns to the prosecution and he says to the prosecution, have you got any video evidence of Mr. Moore? She stood up and she said, no, Your Honour. So he said, there's 30 police officers with all the cameras. Are you telling me they was all switched off? And she went, yes, my lord. Well, yes, my honour. All right. She went to sit down. He said, no. He said, have you got any statements from the police? And she stood up again and said, no statements. So he said, you've not got a single statement from a single police officer, 30 police officers, a number of sergeants, a number of constables, a chief superintendent and an inspector, and you've got no witness statements. She went, no. He then said, so what are you going to do? And she stood up and said, we offer no evidence, Your Honour. Right? The whole gallery erupted in applause. Right? And then the judge said to the gallery, this is not a pantomime. And one of my mates shouted back, oh yes it is. And that's actually a true event, and we all went down a pub. The point being, the judge then said, Mr. Moyam, I said it costs you to come to court with your witnesses. I said 350 quid. He said, prosecution, write him that cheque now, today, for his £350 expenses, because he should never have been brought through the court. They went, we will, right? And they give me 350 quid. The question to you all is, why did they do that? Why did you think that the police and CPS would not offer any evidence against me? Where does it say it? The right to petition the monarch, commitments and prosecutions for such petitioning are illegal. It's a criminal offence. In the English Bill of Rights, there is a public injunction against them arresting me for petitioning the monarch. Highly illegal. Because I knew my rights, I stood up against them, right? What I did was prove it to people. And then they went, wow, you just got a judge is not guilty, a non-prosecution in one of the worst courts in the whole of the country with one of the nastiest judges, and trust me, he was, right? And everyone just said, leave him alone. Because they all knew, here's the kicker. The police can be prosecuted, the prosecutor can be prosecuted, and the judge can be prosecuted. They all went dropless like an hot potato. You have just severely caused a problem. So again, it's knowing that you can do it. The election of members of Parliament ought to be free. Really? Right, so I've just done an election petition. I stood in Runcorn and Helsby as an English constitutionalist. The people need to understand that you're not allowed to cheat in an election in any way. No one's allowed to interfere with an election in any way. It goes all the way back to the first statute of Westminster, chapter 5, and there are severe penalties, and including the English Bill of Rights that says, Article 8, elections ought to be free. That means free from any interference from the state or anyone else. No one is allowed, and it goes back to Ashby versus White. Remember me, all of that is backed up as constitutional law. So I brought an election petition. Important why you should vote. A single elector can bring an election petition in the High Court. You're all aware of that. If you don't vote, you lose your right to bring an election petition. But as soon as you use your vote, then you can bring an election petition. We can crash this whole system if people just listened to the law, right, and understand what we're planning in the background. They started doing it in Southern Ireland, by the way. They've started to listen. Ought to be free. So just to make sure you're all aware, I won the first 2 cases for the election petition with legal arguments against 2 King Counsel, an army of barristers and an army of solicitors in the High Court. Me presenting the case, right? 90 of us in court. They lost their argument. They said the petition must go ahead. 2 High Court judges go to, at that time it was in Chester, where I prosecute the returning officer and Sarah Pouchin MP, right? Literally. Then they decided to appeal it. Right? There's a particular reason why they wanted to appeal it. So it was in the appellant court. Appellant court is the second highest court in the country. And I stood up with 90 of us in the gallery. In fact, so many people turned up, they had to open 2 courts in the appeals court, in the Royal Courts of Justice. And the judge said, this must be seen to be, justice must be seen to be done. And they opened up the other courts, 2 lots sat there. The other side, again, was put in all of these arguments, and then I stood up and gave a 20-minute speech on the Constitution and various other parts, just to let everyone know. I won 3-0. 3 appellant court judges, the second highest judges in this country, all agreed with my legal arguments. The King's Counsels, they said they was wrong. The barristers, they said they was wrong. The solicitors, they said they was wrong. And he said, Mr. Moore, you are correct in law. Right? So what I'm trying to say to people, to get 3-0 in the appellant court is very similar to getting an injunction against the British government in the European Court of Human Rights. Right? Remember, I'm not into any of this BS about skin colour or any of that stuff, right? I'm for disabled people, and I'm for us, as normal, everyday working people, being treated equally in law. That's as simple as that, right? So again, we won them arguments. That levying money, income tax, VAT, European tax is illegal. They're not allowed to create taxes against you and just charge you. VAT, technically, we left the European Union, is an unlawful tax now, because we're taxed via representation, and they set the limits of taxation. That means you can't control it, only they do. Therefore, it's an illegal tax. It always has been, by the way.
Where does it say that, Graeme, in the Constitution?
What, the tax? Well, that goes back to the petition of right and taxation without representation is unlawful. It actually says that. So you must be represented. The levy of money income tax. Commissioners for ecclesiastical causes, you're going to like this. Commissioners for ecclesiastical causes and all other commissions and courts of like nature, like Sharia and Jewish law, are illegal and pernicious. Pernicious means harmful, right? Here's a good bit. Ecclesiastical, just in case, by the way, I'll never pronounce it properly, so ecclesiastical basically means Christian law, right? Why did they bring that in? Because Mr. Vicar or Mr. Priest decided if you didn't give enough money when you went to church in the tray, he could lock you up in the vestry, right? All sorts of strange stuff was going on, and what they were trying to say was, we can do what we like because we're the law. A lot of our laws were completely created by priesthoods and vicars and bishops and all sorts of stuff, right? So they had to, during the Glorious Revolution, they actually put a finish to it all. But here's the kicker. It is constitutionally unlawful to have Sharia. And by the way, I've heard Lady Howe, because we was at a conference, because we're members of Selden Society, where King Charles III is the patron, and the Lady Chief Justice is the active, not a president, but one below, vice president, right? But the most important thing is, Lady Howe, a lady in the audience who was a barrister, also a Muslim, right, said to Lady Howe, when are we going to implement Sharia fully in England? And Lady Howe said, never, right? And everyone, like, not everyone, but she was like having a moan about it. She said it's illegal under the English Bill of Rights. You cannot have Sharia in England. That's why all these councils are illegal. But just to make sure you know I'm not picking on anyone, right? You're not allowed to have Jewish law either. You're not allowed to have Hindu law. You can't have Sikh law. And here's the kicker. You can't have Christian law that is a punishment from your local council parish. Do you understand that? So it applies to everyone equally. So it's not us digging anyone out. We're saying we've already been through all this. Right? Go back to the Constitution and you'll understand that the Constitution is the solution. Our ancestors have seen all this before. And they found a solution. And by the way, they were so much cleverer than us. Right? They didn't walk around staring at mobile phones everywhere they went. Right? They had to get on to, with real life issues. Right? And only good people in business made it. There was no protections for people, you know, for whatever reason there was. So, that grants and promises and fines and forfeitures of Parliament persons before conviction are illegal and void for non-excessive fines imposed nor cruel and unusual punishments inflicted. In 1641, we banned torture. There's another one called the European, not the European, sorry, Criminal Justice Act, 1988, Section 134, torture. And no one in the state is allowed to physically abuse you. And if they do, it carries a life sentence, right? And it comes from the United Nations Convention Against Torture. We've actually used that in one of our cases. One of our cases gets to the High Court December 2026. He actually got found not guilty for abusing a police officer, which was a load of nonsense. And the judge actually acknowledged and told the jury, if you believe he has been tortured, you must find him not guilty. And that's on record. Right? So imagine a judge in this country watching the video evidence of him being abused by 6 or 7 officers and then put into the jury. And by the way, the reason they put it to the jury is because I wrote him out a case stated of exactly what he should say to the judge, and he represented himself. He got rid of his barrister and his solicitor, and the only defence he had was the defence that I'd written for him, and he got found unanimously not guilty. Right? He rang me up just after, crying his eyes out. Commission for lateral grants. This goes back to some other elements. You know, like literally, I think I've said to you, speeding fines. There was actually a debate in Parliament where they mentioned the Bill of Rights and said speeding cameras, you know, them yellow things, are actually illegal, right? If that debate happened in a committee in Parliament, and it's because you don't know that this exists, it continues. When you start to know what your rights are and start reading these books and saying, they're not allowed to do that, right? Once you start claiming your rights, that's what you've got to do, is claim the right. You have to go to court and get a judge to enforce it. And that the redress of all grievances for amending, strengthening and preserving the laws, Parliament ought to be held frequently. The Glorious Revolution actually made, it was every year it had to be held. Then it went to every 3 years. Does everyone know what the 5-year Parliament coincides with? Communist Manifesto. It's a 5-year plan, right? That's all true, by the way. You can look all this up. And Karl Marx and Engels, I think it was, who co-wrote the Communist Manifesto, said, and I quote, "Every communist revolution has been shipwrecked on the rock of England." They didn't say Britain, they said England, right? Because Scotland is Roman law, England is common law. They need to destroy it. And we are the beating heart of the United States of America. And for redress of all grievances, what's that one there? Oh! So again, I said to you earlier, that this has a supremacy clause, that no foreign prince, person, prelate, state or pontificate hath or ought to have any jurisdiction, power, superiority, preeminence or authority, ecclesiastical or spiritual, within this realm, so help me God. You know what so help me God means? It's a solemn promise. You cannot break it. That's what causes perjury. That's why they hang you. Right? You go against God's promise, they will hang you. And that's why we need to take this nation back as a Christian nation. Right? Sure. That we take it back and say, if you go against our rights, that's what's going to happen. So, again, at the bottom here, you will see, above are the common law constitutional rights, removed by the British. The British flag is not your flag. If you are English, your flag is that one. Your country is England. Britain, in law, and I can show you in the law books, Britain is not a country. It was never intended to be a country. It is what's known in law as a unitary state. It is a state with authority, and it is centralised, but it is not a country. So when you hear people talk about Britain and the UK being a country, that is part of the psyop and the lie. Because if you accept British, that only came about in 1948 and 1981, it was furthered because they erased all of our identities completely. If you slap that British tag on your forehead, you've got no English rights anymore because you are British. If you are British, you haven't got Scottish rights, you haven't got English rights, you haven't got Welsh rights, and you ain't got Irish rights. And Ireland slaughtered themselves in 1937 because prior to that they was reliant on the Magna Carta and even the Bill of Rights. Apart from they made some adjustment, they removed the reference to the Pope, right? I've personally got issues with, I don't like anyone having control over us. So, again, you've got all of these things in there. Freedom of election, freedom of speech, that the freedom of speech in debates or proceedings in Parliament ought not to be impeached or questioned in any court or place. This is crucial, outside of Parliament. Do you know what that means? Anyone know what a whip is? Parliamentary whip. Do you know that they've got First line whip, second line whip, third line whip. Third line whip means you're expelled from the party if you don't toe the party line. Why did they do it as a 1 line, 2 line and 3 line? It's a code to tell the people off so they can communicate with the members of parliament that are supposed to be supporting you as constituents, right? So a 1, 2, 3 line whip is a code, and a whip in parliament is unconstitutional, but no one's ever challenged them. But it goes against the English Bill of Rights. Because their conscience is for you, and a member of parliament should always be representing you as constituents, not their party and not the policies of that party. So if you stand up and you rule against a particular policy, they should be saying that in court. The only person who's coming close is Rupert Lowe. And guess what? A week after he mentioned the English Bill of Rights in Parliament, Reform kicked him out. Why? Because they want to bring in a British Bill of Rights. We don't need a British Bill of Rights. The Scots don't need a British Bill of Rights. The Scots have got the claim of right on this, 1689. So again, that's the basis of what goes on. But one thing I will say to everyone, and then we'll go into the questions and answer, and I'm going to sit down and hopefully hear people. Don't forget I'm deaf, right? All of these rights depend on you understanding them and passing them on. Our ancestors fought and died for them rights to pass on to you, right? We do not want to be the generation that fails our ancestors or our future generations. You have to pass the eternal flame of freedom to the next generations, and the only way you can do that is to understand this, to claim your rights, and keep fighting against the totalitarian state and the authoritative state, right? You are neither fascist or communist. You are English, and you should stand up and save the rights of your future generations. Because if you don't, they will never understand the freedoms that you had. Because that's what the Soviets did. By the way, in the Soviet Union, just to make sure you're aware of this, they brainwashed the people to believe that they were Soviet. And the Soviet Union was folded in 1991. If you go and speak to some of the older population in Russia, Poland, even in Poland, believe it or not, they will still tell you they're a Soviet. They brainwashed the people. They indoctrinated them in schools to believe they were something they were not, right? And that's what they've done in this country, right? They don't teach kids about this history. They certainly didn't teach certain generations in this country our history, our real history. This has only been a brief on it. But the main point you really want to get over is, and I'm just going to make sure everyone is aware of this, that in 2011 there was a census for the first time ever. They put on that census English only national identity. 67%, 32.4 million people marked that census English only. British come back as 19%, a minority, right? So they knew who we was. They divided the area up, and a number of groups and corporations took 4 billion off the government and flooded the areas, the northeast in particular, with migrants, because they give them British passports and it diluted the Englishness of the area, right? So they took 4 billion of your money and pumped them areas with other people, right? So again, don't think I'm anti anyone. I'm not. My job is to safeguard England and our culture, right? And I don't care what colour you are, but you must be English, right? So one of my pals from South London, his mum and dad is Jamaican. He's got dreads down to his arse. He talks like me. He walks like me. And when I say to him, what nationality are you? He says, I'm English, right? He hates the British with a vengeance, right? But his brother is the complete opposite, right? So even in the same family, they can be against each other. But he is he's just like us. He just wants to be left alone, right? And that's the way we've always been. So with that, I'll say that's the end of the actual seminar. Anyone got any questions? Go on, there's a few coming up. So I think, right, hang on a minute. All right, let me go for the questions first. Go on, Adrian.
You said that we have the...
Hang on, let me see if this works. Is there another mic there? Right. I'm not sure if that's going to work, but hopefully it will. Because I need to hear the thing. Let me put that on there. Oh. You have to put it right. It needs to be turned on and then push it all the way up to your mouth.
You said that we have the right to travel without a passport between common law jurisdictions, Graeme. We also have the right to bear arms, but how do we do that without a piece of paper from the police?
Yeah, that's a good question. I ain't got a problem with that. I'm not going to suggest to anyone here that I've got a number of firearms or access to them. I can tell you there's plenty of people over England that have. And so the question is, can we undo what they put in place and brainwash? And yeah, you can. If we was to go back to being England, you'd get an English passport, and your English passport is your firearms licence. It's difficult because of what they've done. If I'm honest, it's difficult but not impossible to reverse the changes they've made. What was the other question? There was one about firearms. What was the other one? Oh, passports. It depends on how you're travelling. The travel industry, and it depends on what country you're going to. So if you're going to France and flying there, they have a perfect right as a nation and an administrative state to say we will only allow you in with a passport, right? But corporations and airports will only allow you to fly. But like my mate with a yacht, I mean, he come all the way from New Zealand. Excuse me. We went to a few other places. The only place he had a problem with was India, where they pulled out machine guns and wouldn't let him get off the boat. So he said, that's all right. But you need to give me provisions because it's internationally unlawful to turn a vessel away that needs food and water, right? Because otherwise you're condemning the crew to death by sending them back to sea with no water and no food. And then one of the captains of the police said, give me a list of your provisions. And he did. And the police went and got all his provisions, loaded his boat up, and they were pointing guns at him. And they said, now leave. And he did. It was the only place he had a problem. He went to the Philippines, loads of Indian Ocean countries, England. No one asked him for a passport. Do you want to hear a funny story about him? He left, I was up there on the boat in Hull, or Hull, as they call it, right? And he left there and went to Weymouth. In the English Channel, he had border farts come alongside him. And they called him on the radio. There's a couple of funny stories. Called him on the radio and said, we need to know the nationalities of the crew on board. So he said, 2 Englishmen and a Welshman. If you class a Welshman as a nationality, taking a mick, right? So they turned around and said, they said to him, are all the crew British? He said no. And then they said, what's the nationalities? He said, 2 English and a Welshman. So the guy said, so they're British? He said, no, you're not listening. 2 Englishmen and a Welshman. And the skipper of the border patrol said to him, can we board you as a training exercise? Right. He said, yeah, you can. He said, there's plenty of dinghies you can be boarding. But if you want to board me, but we're running live to YouTube. And he said, you've never seen a border patrol vessel pull away from a boat faster than what they did. Right? He had a number of other issues in the channel. There's a funny one about an aircraft carrier. And this is true, by the way. Do you know how big them things are? And he was trying to get round it. It's a 87-foot vessel, 70 ton. And he went over the radio and he said to the captain of the Queen Elizabeth II aircraft carrier, what are your intentions? He said, you're captain of aircraft carrier, what are your, or military vessel, what is your intentions? So the captain of the Queen Elizabeth II come back to him and said, our intentions are to catch aircraft. And it was like, and then the captain of the Queen Elizabeth II said to him, what's your problem? He said, well, I'm trying to get past you in the English Channel. You're a bit big. I need to know whether it's left or right of you. And the captain said, pass on our left, or whatever it was, port side or starboard side, and we'll keep an eye on you. And he did. Right? So, but again, he's got no ID on that boat whatsoever. And he travels the world on it. No one touches him. So yeah, you can travel without a passport. It is much more difficult in airport situations. They are separate jurisdictions, an airport, which is why you have duty free there. There's lots of different things you need to look at, but do I think passports are a good idea? You'd certainly want to control who's coming into your country. Things have changed, but most of the terrorist situation, you need, obviously, people now. I'm not going to go into detail what I think of who's actually creating most of that, but yeah, it's just one of those things.
Right.
Say that again?
We've got some people watching at home that have some questions for you.
Go on then.
So Nathan said, what is the quickest and most effective way to stop politicians regionalising England?
Wow. First of all, I'm really grateful that someone watching on online has picked up on that. The only real way of stopping the regionalisation of England is for people to become aware and know why they're doing it and what they're doing, and to only commit to political parties that are telling you we understand what regionalisation of England is, and to destroy England via administrative law. Is there a quick way of doing it? Everyone should be aware by now, and I'm hoping that everyone understands. I've not said anything wrong. If anyone thinks I've said anything right wing, left wing, racist, put your hand up if you think I have. Right? The problem is they cancel people like me because I'm telling you the truth. Right? I'm telling you what their plan is. And by the way, the 5 Presidents report of the European Union, that was written over 40 years ago, tells you what their plan is. That tells you they're going to regionalise. Tells you they're going to take your currency. Everything is there. The only people who have lied to you are British politicians. So is there a quick way of doing it? Not really. But the more people that talk about regionalisation and the administrative law being imposed upon us and the removal of common law and constitutional rights, the more of us who are talking about it, the more uncomfortable it becomes, and we're holding the MP's feet to the fire. I'll give you an example. Reform UK, I've not spoken about it. Advance UK, I'm not speaking about it. They're all the same people. They're the Uni Party, and the Uni Party seek to destroy England. So you just got to keep talking. Any others?
Thanks, Graeme. I was going to ask, so knowing your rights, standing in your rights, how do you pull them into kind of the constitution other than going through the, it seems to be you need time, you need money to go through the court system. Is there another way of shutting it down earlier, where you're being challenged, your freedoms, fines? Is there another way to pull them into the constitution?
The more people who understand the Constitution and you've got constitutional rights, I'll give you an indication. I mean, lots of people say to me, where can I see all this stuff? How many of you knew that the Housebury Statutes, 4th edition, volume 10, constitutional law existed? Well, once you do, I mean, a lot of people in the old days, there was a couple of other books they used to have. One, you need to understand your constitutional rights, and two, you need to claim them. The only way you can start... So let me just make sure I emphasise this in the right way. All them people that stood in front of judges and encouraged people on YouTube to say, I'm a living man, I'm a living man. And I demand you read me your oath to a judge who you're trying to persuade them to be on your side, right? And trust me, judges can be really helpful, especially to litigants in person, right? You've just got to make them laugh. Everyone remember the court case up in London? Well, one of the judges, not being rude, but she was female, and everyone said to me, she didn't take her eyes off you. She liked you. Do you know what I mean? I was just laughing, but it's a natural process, right? Of you need to persuade people that you are a nice person. You're trying to do the right thing. The judges will go with you all day long, right? So, getting back to your question, how do you do it? You have standing, right? The free man and land idiots. I don't think they're actually idiots. I think they're a communist psyop to distract what we're doing now, right? Because the more people are pushing through the bullshit, you're not learning the truth, right? It's part of, remember what I said about what communists do? Communists demoralise people, right? And part of the demoralising process is that, right? So that's what you've really got to remember. Most importantly to your question, if they do something to you and you know it is a constitutional violation, you should be either, one, suing the police, remember they're Crown servants, them individually, not the Chief Constable, and they can lose their house because they are personally responsible, right? The second is because you've got standing and if you are presenting your own case, the British judges, the British barristers and the British solicitors who have all not been trained on the Constitution become completely useless. Well, they are useless. But once you know what your rights are and you can present it to a judge, you'll win. So the key is to understand your rights. And the key is to enforce your standing in a court. And do it politely. That's the biggest thing. When you walk, can I just make sure I say this? When you walk into a court and the judges come in and you all stand up, right? Bear in mind the judges are the lions under the front, right? They are the ones who represent the crown. But when they walk in and everyone goes like that and bows to them, you are not bowing to the judge. You are bowing to that. That is the majesty of this country, right? That is the rules and laws of England that you bow to. The same as when you salute an officer of the Crown, I mean in uniform, you're saluting that crown on his shoulder, not the man, right? It is key to understand. That's really important. And if that court hasn't got that, it's not a court. Technically, if a court hasn't got a jury, it's not a common law court either. But there are reasons why you would say it doesn't always have to have one.
Can I speak up or get a mic?
Camera, look. Sorry.
Hi, Graeme, thanks. I've been thinking, I've been
Pull it
racking my
closer.
brain about how to go about deleting some of the anti-constitutional legislation that they've managed to pass and enforce on people, contrary to the Constitution. And I'm wondering, what's your view on this? There's over 4,000 acts of parliament sitting on government.gov.uk, and that's not counting secondary and tertiary.
No, I agree.
This is impossible to read through a lifetime, let alone, defend against when they bring up the panel. So how do we go about, as an Englishman, can you just challenge the law like it used to be in the old days? Can we just stand up and, challenge the laws that are anti-constitutional so as to arrive at a constitutional society?
So that's a good question, and the answer is everyone should be challenging the constitutionality of laws that are being passed in Parliament. The problem is ignorance, right? You have been, by design, not taught about your constitutional rights or your common law rights in school. They used to teach you this in school. And they, even in comprehensive schools and certainly in grammar schools, they called it civics classes. And they explained to people, if Parliament creates a law that is unconstitutional, it can be challenged in the High Court and struck down. There's a couple of things I'll say. There is a way of us challenging the constitutionality. The problem is getting us all to do it, right? There's something else called a group litigation order. Everyone in America, have you all heard of, what's it called in America? Did someone shout out what it's called in America? It's basically a group order, right, in America. In this country it's called a group litigation order. And in America it's called something else. What was it?
Class action.
Class action. Well, I always forget what they call it. But class action is where everyone comes together and it holds a lot more weight. It's actually in the judicial review book in this country that 300-400 people in a society or an association that bring it to case, it holds more merit because there's a big group of them, and especially if it's in the public interest. So a group litigation order or a group of people in a society, which is what we are, bearing in mind I challenge in court, but you've got to remember if you lose you have to pay the costs, right? Whether it's with GoFundMes, etc. But you can challenge the constitutionality of them laws and say this is unconstitutional. It's getting people to do it. Imagine, everyone should be aware, some years ago I had a YouTube channel with just under 100,000 subscribers. They took it down. Then I built it up again to 25,000 subscribers. They took it down. Then 2,500, they took it down. I had 10,000 subscribers on Twitter, then 15,000 subscribers on Twitter, they took it down. I had thousands and thousands of followers on Facebook. They completely removed me from Facebook. They erased me, they digitally erased me off to that thing. I had millions of views on one video on Facebook, right? I used to be on Russia Today every 20 minutes. Sorry, not every 20 minutes. Every Friday for 20 minutes, right? And people used to say to me, I used to watch you, where did you disappear to? I say, they erased me. They don't like what I tell people. And it's not because I'm lying to you, it's because I'm telling you the truth. Right? So what I do is show you the evidence, show you the law books, and say to you, you tell me if I'm wrong, and then you all sit there and go, yeah, you're right, but there needs to be emphasis, and people need to have fire in their belly to move forward, right, and to do it. And don't rely on me, right? My job is to empower you to know where to find the information, to empower you to look up what your rights are, to get you interested in who we are, and take back your nationality as English, right? And don't let these other people steal it from us. That's all it is. Go on. Go on, that mic. Oh.
Sorry, can I ask?
Go on.
No, I've got a couple of questions.
You've got to go right up to your mouth with it.
Several political parties are campaigning to leave the ECHR, sorry. How should we respond to this? Also, are the courts the only way that we can challenge this corrupt government and legislation? What do you think of non-compliance, mass non-compliance?
Okay. If every single person was to stop paying their council tax, yeah, you would bring this system crashing down to its knees, yes. Right? CEOs of councils, everyone aware that CEO of Croydon Council was on £950,000 a year? That the CEO I just went up against in Runcorn, Helsby, Houghton Borough Council was on £200,000 a year. Yeah. Remember that the Prime Minister, I think, is on £136,000 a year. Prime Minister of the UK. Yeah. The average salary of the CEO of the council is £250,000 a year, right? Just think about that. When you all stop paying your council tax, their salaries are out the window. And they are the real problem. They are the real problem in this country. Go on. Hang on, 2 seconds.
Sorry, the other one with political parties.
Right, so the European Convention on Human Rights is BS. Now, you can use the initials, bureaucratic stimuli. It's nonsense because I've already said they're qualifiable rights. Our Constitution has supremacy, always has had supremacy. The thing is, the people need to know and stand up and say that we have a Bill of Rights. If anyone says to you we need a British Bill of Rights, you should tell them the Foxtrot Oscar. You do not want anything to do with the British. The English have rights, the Scots have rights, the Welsh have rights. If them books tell you that we have separate constitutions and we are separate jurisdictions and separate nations. So the political parties say that are mainly nonsense. I do agree that the Human Rights Act 1988 was completely wrong, should never have been put into law. I completely agree that the Constitutional Reform Act of 2005 was treason, put in place by Tony Blair. But I can go through, I've reverse engineered at least 20 laws that were put in place that were to subvert our Constitution, which go against them constitutional rights. So the people that understand what these rights are, and by the way, Rupert Lowe has started to speak of that now. He done a video the other day and he basically said our constitutional and common law rights have been subverted by these politicians, right? So he knows what's going on. You've got to be very careful. There was another politician very similar to Rupert Lowe, and his name is David Amis. He was murdered, right? You need to understand, he was an Englishman. He was proud of being English. He wore the St George's flag. He dressed up as a knight of the realm. Went about on a horse with all this stuff in it. His daughter, to this day, is still saying my father was murdered and the British allowed it to happen. Right? So people need to understand it is very, very, very dangerous to go against these people. Most amusingly, everyone laughs. My dad, 1 minute, he's 95 by the way, but 1 minute he says to me, you should trust the government, boy. And then the next minute he says, they're going to nut you off if you keep going. And I say to him, Dad, which one is it? I either trust the government or they're going to nut me off. Which one is it? Yeah. Right? So, and then he's like, no, right, get it. Go on, there's another question. So you got two there. Go on, one question for me.
Hello, Graeme. So it's clear that our governments are corporate now, administrative law. That's the problem. They're pushing their legislation through corporations. So the corporations are part of this ownership. So our MPs now are serving their donors, not the people, because money will come first. So this is the strength of the Constitution on the English law. which we need to be bold and use more to beat corporate law, because really corporate law has really no place in our country, our nation's law. Is that correct?
That's a difficult one.
Fine line, isn't it?
The concept of what you're talking about, as in today, is true. Corporations, if I went back to East India Dock Company and the way that was incorporated and what happened, that turned out to be the largest military, private military ever. I think they had 380,000 men at arms. That's no Mickey Mouse army. And it was nothing to do with the Crown. The Crown eventually nationalised the East India Dock Company because it become a threat to the Crown. Right? If you know the real history of that, you think, wow, right? So there are issues, but getting back to what you just said, the issues I have with blaming everything on corporations is corporations have always been in our history. A charter is what's known as a corporation. In other words, the original Magna Carta, which is a charter, is corporate. Right? When they chartered a city, right? So when I say chartered it, the charter, when you have let's say Bristol Charter, which I've got a copy of the original own, when you read through that, it is the Crown trusting the people within Bristol City to manage their own affairs, to govern themselves, to appoint their magistrates and their judges, right, and to be left alone, right? But the corporation, it was incorporating them and giving them a charter and a set of rules. A bit like, the charter was like a constitution, right? Which is why council, some people that are doing this out there are really good at the local stuff, right? Because they understand that every council is a charter, has a constitution of its own. What you've got to find out is how they're offending against that constitution and shut them down using the constitution of that shire or of that county, right? There's illustrations of that. I could tell you, not far from here, Romford. Because they've actually got a chart, I forget what it's called, but one of our group is really into it. And they actually stopped using an ancient chart, right? The City of London Corporation, how powerful are they, from putting a new market in Romford. And then the people of Romford went, you can't do that, we've got an ancient charter. Yeah. And they brought up the ancient charter, right? And the City of London Corporation went, whoa, and backed right off. You've just got to know that them laws are there, right? You've got to use them. But, so blaming all forms of corporations is not necessarily a good thing. You have to be very conscious of the communist element to that. Because it's, I mean, I've got a corporation. We run a corporation. It depends, and again, if you go and look up Coke and legal fictions, he actually talks about corporations being able to transgress because they can't die. You then have officers of the corporation, right, which is why the monarchy can never die, right? And it's a legal fiction. All of that's in them books. So getting back to your question, do I believe that MPs are representing corporations? Most definitely, because they've got lobbyists, they're being bribed. Most of them end up being multi-millionaires. They're at it. Would I hang them for such an offence?
So that's perjury.
Well, yeah. No, I think, personally, if they go against us, then you've got to do something. You can't keep letting them get away with it. I don't believe that the party political system should operate at all. One person recently asked me, if you had to put yourself as anything politically, what is it? And I said, I'm a Whig. And the difference between a Whig and a Tory is the Tories were the barons, the Rother barons, and they was establishment and supported the monarch. And the Whigs were about constitutional limitations of both Parliament and the Crown, which is what I am. And then they exported that to America. The Whigs actually left England and built America as a mirror of England. That's why they got all that stuff out there. So I would say that. Did that answer the question?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Do you want to pass it to Emma? Well, we'll get in the back, but you're going to have to grab the mic. Go on.
So we've got two from some people that are watching at home. The first one is by someone with the username Nosy Poke. How do we stop Starmer from eradicating jury trials?
First of all, people must stand up against it on protest. The only time I've really seen anyone protest in this country, and by the way, the Labour Party ignored it. The biggest protest was against the war with Iraq, which I was part of, against war. I am against war, right? Georgia war, not war. But that doesn't mean that you don't have to defend yourself. You've got to defend yourself, right? But what you're actually saying there is, how can we stop it? The problem is, and mainstream media are part of... Has anyone heard of Glavlit, the USSR? Glavlit. Glavlit had full control in the USSR against... controlled all communications, all public communications. You wonder the way they controlled the population. The equivalent to Glavlit in this country is Ofcom, right? By the way, the head of Ofcom is an Arafabian, right? He's a committed Marxist. So the problem we've got is the mainstream media are all corrupt to the core, and especially the BBC. So getting back to the other reference, stop paying the council tax. But everyone needs to do it. And by the way, it's one tax that you can stop tomorrow. But everyone needs to do it, right? You need to bring them to their knees. Problem is, some people that are quite wealthy or don't know the coup or quite happy, they'll be happy enough until this is a full Comanche communist country and they've got nothing, right? And then they'll say, oh, the conspiracy theorists were right. Right, but it's too late then. And the hardest thing is to get out of it. The second thing is, stop paying, getting back to that subject, stop paying the BBC fees. I haven't paid the BBC for 15 years, right? Without saying too much, I ain't paid no council tax for 15 years either. I don't advertise that fact, right? But I just want people to know exactly. You have to stand up and actually do something. The last time I see a full-on was, say, against Iraq. Even if 10 million of us took to the streets tomorrow with reference to the removal of juries, but if people, I don't like saying this, but I'm going to say it, if people actually think that's a good idea and don't stand up, there is something mentally wrong with you. Right? To understand that a jury of your peers can give you a not guilty, even if they call it a perverse verdict. You can persuade a jury to find the person not guilty, and the judge can say he is guilty by law and by deed, and the jury can say up yours, we're finding him not guilty, and there's nothing the judge can do, nothing the state can do. Right? So people just need to understand that. They call it a perverse verdict.
One that we have from the stream is, how would voiding the Acts of Union 1707 affect England?
You get me dancing in the streets. You would see the biggest party you've ever seen in your life. I don't have to go to America anymore and support July the 4th, right? They was all amazed when I was out there on July the 4th. I was going, we've got a Brit. I said, don't you dare call me a Brit. Right, and then we was all dancing in the street because of independence. How would it affect us? Right, so that's a really great question. It means if you null and void the Acts of Union, what created the British Parliament, was the Acts of Union. It means every law ever been passed from 1707 is null and void with it. To give you an indication, some of you may like this, I don't care. All I'm doing is telling you the truth, whether you like it or not. It means all of the laws in one hit that were brought into effect to subvert our constitution would be null and void. Some of the repeals of the English Bill of Rights, which were unlawful, would be null and void. The repeal of the Act of Settlement, 1701, that stopped, in other words, instantly, people like Sadiq Khan could not be the Mayor of London, right? There are so many positives to that, and again, people don't realise that 7 years after it was enacted, there was a bill put through to annul it. This is the bit people won't like. And everyone's got their own opinions. I'm just not brainwashed or indoctrinated. The Balfour Agreement would be null and void. The Palestinian Mandate of 1923 would be null and void. The Partition Act of 1948 was null and void. The Levant would go back to being the Levant and not Israel, and not that. And again, people accuse me of being far right. It is the left that look at that and say, this is so wrong. So I'm not interested in left and right politics. I'm interested in right and wrong. I'm interested in equality. I'm interested in the rule of law. And I'm interested in protecting Christians. The USSR and the Soviets murdered 70 million Christians, right? I can tell you now, we're coming close to that again. And if people don't wake up, it'll be too late. And by the time it gets to certain areas, you'll all be completely dead. Let me come over there for a question in a second. Have you got a mic?
No, I'm not.
Where's the mic? Go on. Hopefully I answered that question. The biggest positive is we completely reset to being England, and we would go back to counties and shires. You would go back to distributed governance. You would govern yourself. You would be counties and shires, districts and parishes. It would be an English Parliament immediately. You would have English MPs again. And they represent you. The best possible outcome is that there are slight variations where you don't have to avoid the Acts of Union. I'll be honest with you, there's always a compromise, but my own personal opinion is the only real way of taking England back is to avoid the Acts of Union and give Scotland back to the Scots. There's so many positives, it's unreal. And I could go all through them. But again, they won't allow people like me anywhere near mainstream media explaining that to people because the Unionists, who are a minority, and the British regime, the cabal, whatever you want to call them, they have too many vested personal interests, mostly corrupt, to keep themselves in power. Isn't that right? You got another question?
Reorganisation of local government, right? We had a situation where the previous Deputy Prime Minister...
You're going to have to talk into that, right into the top. Go on.
Right. We had a situation where the Deputy Prime Minister and Secretary of State for Housing, Angela Rayner, came up with a scheme to reorganise local government. In Essex County Council, we have got, or did have, the leader of Essex County Council, Councillor Kevin Bentley, colluded with Rayner to defer the county council elections this year. The county council elections are for 4 years. They've weaseled it to either 5, 6 or 7 years. Can you tell me if Bentley committed anything unlawful or unconstitutional, because he has just deferred the county council elections. So people are effectively not represented at present.
No, the answer to that is you have the right to free elections, and it is a constitutional right. They are not allowed to interfere with any form of elections. The problem is, not enough people know that. And once you start to understand that you need to use the Constitution, it is unlawful to interfere, right? And the books tell you that. And it goes all the way back to 1275. It's unlawful to interfere with elections. So what I've been watching what they've been in Essex, but I can only do so much. I've took these people and been to the High Court. I win the cases. I think I've proved to most people I'm not a mug. Right? Even the High Court judges are like, this geezer knows what he's doing. Right? The point I'm trying to make to you is you need to be at a level where you have standing and you can bring the case and present it to a judge. And once you do that, challenge them. Go to court and say, this goes against my constitutional rights. Explain to them what the constitutional rights. Show them the case law that supports your argument, and tell them that you want what they've done declared unlawful. Just ask for a declaration. You ain't got to ask for damages. Right? Everyone thinks you've got to go in for millions of pounds, apart from them pricks who cancelled us last night. Right? They're getting caned. Right? And the reason they are is because a different set of laws govern that, right? So what you've got is a situation. I can tell you now, there's members of Parliament that know, Rupert Lowe, for example, knows that that's constitutionally unlawful to cancel elections. But you've got to have someone with standing who can go up, preferably, and this is the awkward bit, with no assets. Because if you lose, they can't take nothing off you.
That's right.
But if you win, this is the good part. If you win, under English law, you can claim 2/3 of what they was putting in. So if they turn around to you, if you win the case and they say, our legal costs are £100,000, and they lose, you put a cost application in and say, I want 70 grand. And they have to pay you 70 grand. But you're a litigant person. It's what they brought in to even it up. Which hopefully we're going to have some luck with that, because the appeal court's already told me to put that in, so I will be. Does that answer the question though? Yeah. That's all. You've got some really good people in Essex, highly switched on, people that I've got a lot of respect for, and some of them are here today, that do know what they're doing. They was, a long time ago, there was going down some of the free man of the land idiocy. Most people with any intelligence soon come out of that and realise it's complete and utter BS. But then the good thing is you get the intelligent people that start reading the actual law and then start formulating what their arguments are. That's all you've got to do. Remember, crucially important, your job is to persuade the judge that you are right in law. If you do a better job of doing that than the other side, like the King's Counsel in my case, everyone agreed was a complete and utter knob, right? Was boring the judges to death, and I thought, oh no, I'll let him carry on. Then he started to aggravate the judges, and the judges started shouting at him, right? And I was sitting there thinking, go on, son, you're supporting my case, go on. And then once he'd done enough damage to his own case, then I didn't have to say it. I just said it's constitutional right, Article 8. And it's a European Convention right. And that was it. And they was like, okay, thanks very much. Bang, yeah, we're fine for Mr. Moore. That was it. Well, they did a bit more than that. So it's all positive. But that answers the question. You just need to get into and understand it. I don't like, and again, remember this, don't write 300-page dissertations on what your argument is. It needs to be succinct. I would always keep it, try and keep it less than 20 pages. You start writing folders like that you want a judge to read. He's like, no. Anyone get long emails from people that write massive emails and expect you to read them? Like, I get them all the time, and I'm like, Or people who send me videos. In a 3-hour video, and say, Graeme, watch this. I said, do you know how many people send me 3-hour videos? Right? Hundreds. Right? I said, if I watch all the videos, I'd never get anything done. The judges are exactly the same. They're continuously reading. By the way, and this is really important, I get a professional legal format to put my case forward. Right? So I write the case out, and then, it reminds me, I've got to pay him, right? And then you get them to write it out and set it out, because it's got to be done in a certain way, and it's 1.5 spacing between each line, and it's so judges can write in between what they think. And then you have a margin either side where they can write a little bit more, right? And it's got to be a minimum of 12 font, right? Well, I've read all the books from judges that they say the most aggravating thing is when people send them like 10 point and a page with no paragraphs, and they're supposed to read that and understand what you're saying. You have to play the game, right? And the game is you need to be as assisting to the judge as possible. And then if the other side have wrote an absolute pant skeleton argument that's not how the judge wants to see it, and that is aggravating, you've got half a chance that that judge says, I don't care if it's the King Counsel, lobs it to one side and says, I'll like your one, I can read it. And he'll sit there reading your argument. So there's more, it's not just about the law, it's the way you present it to the judge. Did that answer it? I can try and help people. Problem I've got is hundreds of people asking me, and there's only one of me. Right? There are people in our group that are very good. I mean, I don't, just to make sure you're aware, when I do a massive challenge, I send it into our group. We've got two or three layers in our group, right? So the top layer of our group, I fire in my skeleton argument and say, read it. And they read through it to make sure that they're getting what I'm putting over. Like I say, and then when we've actually put it in, then I'll publish it because it becomes public information.
So Graeme,
Thank you, Graeme.
Graeme, do you have to become a member of the English Constitution Party to then be part of those discussions? And that's where the forums are.
No, there's one next to you there. There's a gentleman over there that keeps wanting to ask a question. Mike, do you mind? If you want to get someone to run, and I'll just answer that question. So the English Constitution Society is going full on as probably a trust, only because we're doing the training stuff as well. And you can become a member of that. But the English Constitution Society is not political. In other words, even if you was, why you would be an absolutely raving lunatic Labour, whatever, and you could come along to these events. And by the way, people, I've been and watched Jeremy Corbyn. I've asked him questions personally. I've met Jeremy Corbyn. He's a really nice fellow. He's just a communist. But at least he's honest. He tells you he's a communist, right? Whereas the others don't. So yeah, anyone can do that. Mainly watching the channel and becoming a part of that, then you get noticed by the moderators, and then the moderators, I watch what's going on sometimes. I can see who's causing trouble and who's not. We're not interested in that. You can have opinions. We haven't got a problem with opinions, but it's if you're trying to force an opinion that is clearly wrong, wherever you've got it from. Some people just get set in their head and they believe something, and they won't. Don't matter how much evidence you show them that they're wrong. Yeah. By the way, then people are called idiots, and the Soviets called them useful idiots, right? So that's it. But again, remember. Yeah, the English Constitution Society, you can be a conservative, you can be reform, you can be advanced UK, you can be anything you want. We don't care what you are. But if you're going to be in any form of politics, you should understand the Constitution, because it's your job not to create law that interferes with our rights. That's it, really. Question? You got to speak right in close like that.
Nice to be here, glad to see you today. And I'd like to know, there is double jeopardy in this country.
Say that again?
We try twice on the same charge. Well, no person has been done that.
I can't really hear you. Don't forget I'm deaf, right? So I want to hear it coming through that mic. Put it right up against your mouth and talking through it.
I'd like to come to what that gentleman was saying about corporation law. You know the House of Lords and the House of Commons have done numbers on them. Related to a corporation.
You're saying they're a corporation?
Yeah. They've got DUNS numbers.
DUNS numbers.
Let me. What did you say?
They've got DUNS numbers. You've got
look. Right, let me just make sure I'm clear on this, right? Let me just make sure I'm clear on this. I have got no issue with corporations, right? If you've got an issue with corporations, any of you, right? Corporations have policies, they have rules, they do certain things, right? You can have good corporations and bad corporations, right? Corporations per se are not a bad thing. I'm not suggesting to you that the officers of a corporation cannot be bad people and cannot create bad policy. Of course they can. But you should be challenging them if they're doing that, especially if they go against your constitutional rights. But getting back to Parliament itself, and again, this is often some of the stuff that I get from Freeman to the Landers, they seem to think, weirdly, that the only law in this country is Magna Carta 1215. Right? It's charter. And what is charter? It was created by King in Council. Right? King in Council was the earliest form of, if you want to call it corporate governance, you can, but they created law. A charter is the earliest name for a statute. So what you've got to look at is what it is they're actually doing. So if you get a corporation or you get politicians that are doing something wrong, you should be challenging them. The problem is they're not. No one is, and they should be. And the reason they're not challenging is because they're ignorant of their own constitution. So that's all I'm saying to people. You have to be very careful in of getting everyone to have an issue with a corporation. I've got a corporation. Are you saying I'm a bad person? Do you know what I mean? It's like Freemasons, right? I know lots of Freemasons. By the way, I'm not a Freemason, right? But my dad's a Freemason. I've met all of his friends. My dad is one of the nicest men you've ever met, right? He was in business for the best part of 60 years, employed 40 people, owned and operated 2 factories. And unlike most of the people in this room, he won the polls. Instead of spunking it, he bought 2 factories and employed all his brothers, all fairly, all earning a living. 40 geezers brought up their families because my dad didn't spunk his money. He went and put it into a factory. Yet there's people out there that are communist in nature, don't like the fact that he was a managing director, even though he worked on a lathe every day. That's all I'm saying. You have to be very careful with what you say about corporations.
Basically, a corporation don't have a president.
Sorry?
Basically, a corporation has got a president or a CEO, and his word's law.
Yeah, but it's not. When you say it's law, I could really get into this argument. It goes down the road of a road that I can start becoming very abusive for a reason, right? But I can create a company tomorrow and create a law. There's still restrictions. I mentioned it earlier with restraint of trade, right? Restraint of trade, if I was to create a corporation and say anyone who works for us, you're not allowed to do X, Y, Z, and it interferes with some of your rights, you could take me to court and say that's unconstitutional, right? The only reason people are not doing it is because they don't know it's unconstitutional. If you all knew what your rights was, I'm absolutely sure you would challenge a few things in your life. I have actually seen, again, AY audits, is it? when he told a police officer. And again, I had people saying to me that police officers are policy officers. I was like, shut up. The argument that they're public servants, no, they're not. We're not a republic. We're a constitutional monarchy. And they are crown servants, and that is their oath. Right? I've already won in the High Court. But the arguments I don't get into, and I'm not suggesting you're one of them, right? All I'm saying is, I've stood up and done it, not only in the European Convention for Human Rights, and won an injunction against these, I won't swear, people that done that to the 6-year-old, right, and took her life. I've done it in the High Court, I've done it in the Appellate Court, and I'll keep pushing forward, right? Most of these knobs online, and I know plenty of them have done it, right, have persuaded people, you know that bullshit you hear, I don't contract with you, right? Next thing you know, you've got a warrant, they kick it in your door because you haven't allowed, because you're a tenant, and you haven't allowed the landlord to survey and put a licence on your boiler, right, which by law they have to do every year. And it ain't just your own safety for monoxide and all sorts of stuff. It's because you don't want to blow up your neighbours, right? It's fairly obvious that there are certain things. But I've seen lots of people evicted from their homes because they listen to absolute bullshit online. All right? You have to get away from that. But I'm not suggesting to you you're one of them people. What I am saying to you is anyone can create a corporation, right?
I'm just saying the House of Parliament, a corporation.
Sorry?
I mean, the House of Parliament, the House of Lords are a corporation now, and they're taking us, the slaves.
So no.
The council and the parliament are all corporations registered on Dunn Street. They're no longer working for people.
What that gentleman's just referred to, it's more about the management, right? It's more about management and structure. If you go back through history, I mean, we've now got a population of probably, which is a lie, it's probably a lot more, 70 million. How are you supposed to manage that without some form of structure? Right? That's all I'm saying is you have to be very careful with what you actually have on a pop app. Like, if you tell me why you think a corporation is doing something wrong, then I would say, so where is it in their policies? Someone who's really good at this, there's some things I disagree with, right, but one person I've got a lot of respect for is Clive Edwards. And he's actually done it. We had a conversation, it was quite funny. I said, listen, this person wanted me and him to have an argument online, and it wasn't live. And I said to him, Clive, are you a Christian? He said, yeah. I said, so am I. I said, we shouldn't be fighting each other, and I don't want them turning us against each other. He said, nor do I. And what he's done to the local council is spun them on their head, right? And he said, these people who contact me about a parking ticket, right? The geezer built £1 million house without fucking planning permission and stuck his finger up at the local council because he'd done it completely lawfully and no one can touch him, right? So I said, Clive, I'm with you. But then he looks at me and he says, what you're doing is national, right? And using the Constitution. And what me and Clive agreed to is Clive uses the county or shire constitution or charter against them. Like I said with the other person, with what happened in Romford. You wouldn't believe, would you, that a 700-year-old charter could protect you today, and yet it does. That's all I'm saying. You've got to know what the law is. Go on. Or you want to wind it up?
She's just asked if we can wrap it up.
But there's one more question over here.
Okay.
There's a question coming over here.
Frivolous one
Can
as
I
well.
just ask, have you got anywhere where all these posters are? Have you got them on a website or something?
Yeah, there's a number of websites. English Constitution Society.co.uk.
Right, thank you.
It's the society, but you will find them, and we've got them published elsewhere. But you can go and look them all up. If you take photos of them, and then look them all up. And like I say, in them books, all them laws are there and their statutes.
They're
So,
on the government website.
yeah, they're on the government website.
I've pulled the Bill of Rights off and printed it off, and it's just show people, it's just showing that topic there to say that it's still bloody law. Okay, thank you.
Right. I think that is the end.
No, one more question.
Oh, there's one more question, sorry.
Mine is about 20 odd years ago.
Speak that straight into your mouth.
About 20 years ago or more, I took my 2 boys on holiday, and we went to America and then on to the Caribbean and home. And then about 3 weeks after they'd been home, their mum phoned me up and said, "Do you know their passports have been out of date?" And I'm like, "It can't have been. We've just gone to the States where they're really hot on things, the Caribbean, and then come back to Gatwick. Mine was all right. Theirs were both out of date when we started. So I thought, well, they could have stopped us from going and having this lovely holiday together. And it's only today that it's thrown up. And do you think that could have been because they weren't really necessary, or they just made a mistake?"
Common law jurisdictions don't need passports.
It's been driving me nuts. I just thought they must have made this. How could they make such this mental mistake?
Probably. I mean, it can be partly, it was a long time ago, someone wasn't doing their job properly, but you're not going to complain about that. But if you was going to
the Caribbean and the States, I mean...
Or United States of America, or apart from, if you want to talk about the Caribbean, the Cuba is the only, and everyone should know the reason why. Cuba is not a common law constitution, right? It's a communist nation. Right, so if you went to Jamaica, various islands in the Caribbean, it's a common law jurisdiction. So even if you was flying to Australia or New Zealand or Canada, common law constitutions, they don't need a passport. If they know who you are, by the way, they can check who you are and what you are.
Right, because it's just been doing me head in for all that time, and I just, but I didn't really need it.
No, I agree. Right. Is that it? Pass the old mic back. Sorry? Right. Last question, because these lovely people have let us reside here for a few hours.
It does work, yeah.
You've got to go right close to now.
Yeah. Where it says the right to bring up and protect our children, how does that fit in with what happened with the birth certificate fraud?
With what?
The birth certificate fraud.
Again, I've heard this one. Not being disrespectful, but you need to know who's in. Look, listen, if you don't have birth certificates and understand, and I ain't bitching about the people, you can go to hospital and you can ask, without having a birth certificate, you can have a certificate of live birth. Travellers do it. And just to let you know, that travellers know more about the common law than most people I've ever known, right? They understand the law of the land, right? It's why they get away with absolute murder, right? But I like them because the intelligent ones know exactly what they're doing. But getting back to one of the reasons they brought in birth certificate, to start talking about taxation and what it does going forward, I don't really want to get involved in that. What I do know is every city, every state, every shire needs to know how many people are there to plan. They need to plan the sewage, they need to plan the water treatment, they need to plan everything, right? If I was to turn around to the people running this club or this premises, right, and they say to me, "How many people do you think's coming?" Right? If I said 2,000, they'd say we can't do it. Why not? Because it would be against fire regulations. We haven't got toilet facilities. We haven't got this. We ain't got the bar staff. And they would go through a big list of things. So one of the reasons why people have birth certificates is to give the government. I'm not suggesting that they don't abuse it. They are abusing it. I absolutely refuse national identification. The gentleman brought up, well, he's disappeared, the gentleman brought up corporations. We've just been asked to provide digital ID as directors of our corporation, and I've just said, Foxtrot Oscar. I'd rather shut down the company. I'm not interested. Right, so I also believe that you've got to have personal skin in the game. Don't sit there and tell people, well, we're going to protest against national ID and digital ID, and then you're giving digital ID by the back door to the corporation element, which is the government want to know. You either stand by what you believe or you don't, right? I have got convictions and an absolute belief in English national rights, right? So you must stand up for that. So getting back to your point, I ain't got a problem with birth certificates. You know, do they associate you in any way with taxation, forward taxation? The state has control of you? Not really. They've got control of the family courts. The family courts are the Star Chamber. You should have been standing up against that a long time ago. I mean, literally, they can take your kids off you tomorrow. And here's the kicker: they will put them in a family, a foster home, or whatever, who are a bunch of nonces that will rape your kids every day, and there's absolutely nothing you can do about getting them kids out of the house. Right? So it wasn't me who allowed that to happen. It was the people. When I say you, I don't mean you personally. But if you ain't going to stand up against it, they're just going to keep doing it. But that's it. I am going to say thank you for coming.